Hi, I'm Dr. Linda Mintle. Hey, thanks for listening to the Dr. Linda Mintle Show. Faith radio podcasts are only possible because of your support. Thanks for giving and for sharing with a friend.
Doing life together, reaching out with hope, encouraging one another, each step along the road. You and I can make everything a little better, doing life together.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Linda Mintle Show. I'm your host, Dr. Linda Mintle, the relationship doctor, and I'm here along with my co-host, the other Dr. Mintle, my husband, Norm. And every weekend we're here, we're doing life together, and as always, we're so glad you joined us.
We are. This doing life together thing is quite a deal, isn't
It's
it?
working out, isn't it? We've been doing it together for a long time. That's right. That's right.
Well, today we want to talk about a term that we've heard before, and we want to get into a little bit more in terms of relationships, and that's narcissist. That's not a positive description when somebody says, well, he's a narcissist.
Right.
It's not. It's just not good, is it? But how does narcissism affect your relationships if you're living with someone or someone you're close to is a narcissist? We're going to focus on that very issue today, living with a narcissist, what you need to know, and why this is so difficult. So let's start out, like we often do, with a definition, please. What is narcissism?
I'm glad we're talking about this, Norm, because I get a lot of people asking me about this. So I don't know if there's just a lot of people living with someone who's a narcissist or if they just see a lot of narcissistic qualities about people, but this is a topic that comes up over and over and over. So that's one of the reasons why we're addressing it. But we're taking the angle, like you said, on living with someone like this. But we need to know, like you said, what is it? So generally speaking, narcissism has to do with having a strong sense of self-importance, fantasies about fame or glory, exaggerations of your abilities. Usually narcissists need to be admired. They often exploit others. And one of the key characteristics that makes it really difficult to live with somebody with this is they lack empathy.
Whoa. Well, okay, you gave us a good description. Thank you for that definition. But no wonder, I can see now why this causes so many problems in relationships. But how does this happen? How does it develop?
Yeah, we don't always know in psychiatric care how things develop, but we do know that it's a combination of genetics. Often there's some type of childhood abuse or trauma or upbringing and relationship issues with caregivers, sometimes personality, temperament. It's just a lot of different factors.
So it's not a medical thing.
I mean, there's nothing you can point to. You can't look at a marker like you can for diabetes or, cancer and say, there's the cell, there's the marker. But let me give you an example.
Okay.
Your parents might have been highly focused on status and achievement, right?
Okay.
And so then that makes the child feel more special or valuable because of their accomplishments. However, it can also come when a child is ignored, disrespected, maybe shamed, being less educated or attractive, or not receiving the necessary attention, sometimes feeling jealous, feeling out of control. As a result of all those different things, a person has a fragile self-image and low self-esteem. And then they're reliant on external validation.
Meaning from other people.
Yeah, so they're
Okay.
looking for that because they feel so insecure and they don't feel sure of themselves. So there is this heightened sensitivity to self-concept, which can lead to anxiety, feelings of helplessness, persistent negative emotions, not trusting other people, and sometimes withdrawal, but it often shows up just the other way, of I can handle anything, I can do whatever I need to, I'm important, I can fix everything. So it's an interesting way that people compensate and cope.
That's interesting because our culture values people who are self-starters and can get things done. And then if you need all this validation, you seem weak and needy. And this is a lot of contrasting.
Yeah, it's underneath it, though. The underneath stuff is that the person really is feeling inadequate.
Okay.
Like that's at the core of what we're talking about.
Right.
And this is a way that they compensate. It's definitely a defensive posture. It's a strong one and it's hard to break and treat if the person is unwilling to acknowledge the problem.
Okay. So if one of the problems is feeling superior, Why would they ever admit that?
Well, they don't.
Oh.
That's our first point as to why living with someone with narcissism is really tough. What it usually takes to get help is that other people have to give them an ultimatum. Or some type of threat, I'm going to leave you, or I'm not going to spend much time with you. So for instance, I've heard families say, I'm not going to let the grandchildren play with you because of the way, you're so focused on yourself, or that you're so difficult to be with. Or a spouse will say, I can't live this way anymore. I'm not going to stay with you because you're so when somebody is saying you either get help or I'm leaving or I'm going to restrict the time that I spend with you, that's usually what prompts the person to get help and get some therapy.
So you draw the line, and hopefully that challenges them to do something. But what about emotional abuse? That seems like that might be in there somewhere.
Yeah, that's really one of the challenges, because conflict can escalate if you push back at the person. So think about it. They're always right.
Okay.
So
Okay.
how do you, how you're going to deal with that is going to be really tough, because they don't like it if you challenge them.
Right. So we want to give positive strategies for working out your relationship with a narcissist. But first, let's look for the signs. What might tell us that our partner or friend is a narcissist?
Yeah. So again, this grandiose sense of self-importance. So look for people who exaggerate their achievements and their talents, people that want to be recognized as superior than other people. That's one of the big ones.
Okay. May I stop you for just a second?
Yeah.
You're going to give us several signs. Not anyone by themselves, I'm guessing, means you're a narcissist, because I know a lot of people. You just described people I know.
Yeah, well, this would be a cluster of symptoms that you would see kind of working together, like a pattern in somebody.
Okay.
But one of them is they're preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, ideal love. Like, they have to be loved, and they have to have success, and they have to be thought of as brilliant.
Kind of grandiose.
Yeah. They believe that they're special, unique, and they can only be, really understood by people that are also special and high status people, or some kind of institution. I think one of the really key ones is this need for excessive admiration. And along with that, and as I'm mentioning these, you can just think about how difficult these would be to live with.
Incredible.
But a very strong sense of entitlement, exploitive of others, taking advantage so they can get their own things accomplished. And that lacking empathy is really, really hard, because they don't identify with the needs of other people.
Is it that they can't, or that they are so self-consumed that they don't?
Yeah,
have room?
it's that inadequacy that's rooting that, and they're so consumed with themselves that they don't attend to the needs and the empathy of other people. And they're often envious of people, people who have success. And so it comes out a lot of times as arrogant, haughty type of behaviors or attitudes.
Okay. I know that in your book that you wrote about conflict, We Need to Talk, you have a chapter in there called Dealing with Difficult People, and you provide some very specific tactics for approaching conflict with a narcissist.
Yeah, and I think because conflict is so difficult in these relationships, and I really did have this diagnosis and a couple other ones in mind, but there's a lot of tips that are going to that we're going to talk about in the future here. But let me just say that these strategies are designed to keep conflict low, like not escalate it, because you're not going to win if you try to reason with a narcissist. That just doesn't work. So the first tip here is don't tell the person you're a narcissist. Like, don't just say that to them, because that just makes the relationship worse. And maybe that seems obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people use the label when they get so frustrated in a conflict or an argument.
Right, sure.
But that makes things worse. So what you have to do in any kind of conflict or trying to deal with a problem is you have to try to remain calm and not do name calling.
Well, that's almost impossible in some situations, at least I think it would be for me, because they aren't being reasonable. And many times I'm guessing they're blaming me for the problem, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But remember, you're not going to reason with them. So fighting back doesn't work. It only escalates the situation. You really need to stick to the facts. Do you remember that? I'm going to really date myself. What's that? Was that Dragnet? Who is the guy who said, just the facts, ma'am?
Jack, somebody, give me the facts.
Yeah,
Only
just the facts.
ma'am.
Just the facts,
Right.
man. That's how you have to think when you're
Right.
dealing with a narcissist, and really choose the battles that you think are really important. And when you're doing that, this is just something you need to think about. Always assess your safety and don't push if the other person is getting seriously agitated.
So make sure you're protecting yourself.
Yeah, like if they're starting to get really, really
Right,
agitated,
right.
then you might want to just stop the conversation.
Okay, those are good tips for conflict, but let's broaden the discussion to general principles. You've already mentioned boundaries, but I know they're very important. So could you tell us more?
They're so important. You have to be really clear about what behaviors you will and will not tolerate. So then communicate those boundaries firmly but calmly, and be prepared to enforce them consistently, because the person is most likely going to push back on you so that you give in if they're challenged. So, for example, you might say, I won't continue this conversation if you start yelling or insulting me. And if that happens, I'm going to leave the room. Now, that's a boundary,
Right.
Norm.
Right.
Then follow through if the boundary's crossed.
Okay, good. On another one that you mentioned, when someone isn't cooperating with you or is always thinking they're right, the smartest guy in the room, I've heard that phrase before, that can be absolutely maddening.
Yeah, which is why the next strategy is so important. You must stay as emotionally detached as possible. And why? Because a narcissist thrives on emotional reactions. And when you're calm and detached, you deny them the satisfaction of upsetting you.
Oh,
now,
that's
this
good.
doesn't mean suppressing your emotions
Right.
entirely, but rather processing them in a healthy way outside of the interaction with the narcissist.
Okay, I've heard of a method called the gray rock method that's supposed to help. How does that work?
It's kind of a crazy name, isn't
Yeah,
it?
gray,
the Gray Rock.
Sounds like a TV network.
Or a TV show,
Yeah.
The Gray Rock. The idea behind that is that you make yourself as uninteresting and unreactive as possible. I
Like
guess
a
that's
rock.
what a gray rock is,
I guess
right?
so.
They're not too interesting when you look at them, right? And when you do that, it discourages the attention and the engagement, and it really helps you detach and keep things neutral, like a gray rock.
Okay.
So the idea is that the narcissist loses interest in trying to abuse or manipulate you, and it reduces the possibility of harm.
But how draining. This
I
is so
know.
much work to work with these people and to maintain it, keep it going. It certainly doesn't help your intimacy, I would think, or even closeness with a friend.
So it's not a solve for the problem.
Okay.
It's just one way to stop the escalation, especially if you think the person could become abusive.
Yeah. That ties into our next strategy, which is take care of yourself. When you're dealing with a narcissist, as I just said, it could be very draining, but why is taking care of yourself so important?
I mean, so your own mental health doesn't suffer, which is why you need to pay attention to your emotional reserves and activities that help, like maybe exercise, Christian meditation, spending time with supportive friends, engaging in a hobby that you enjoy, something like that.
But it also seems like that leads us to finding a good support system.
That's right. So trusted friends, family members, or even a therapist to help you stay sane and on track with your interactions. They also help you realize you could be getting gaslit or manipulated. So they do provide a reality check.
Okay, well, so far so good, but we have more strategies yet to come. Stay with us as we take this short break. More on living with a narcissist right after this.
Hi, I'm Dr. Linda Mintle of the Dr. Linda Mintle Show.
And I'm Dr. James Cribbs, and we co-authored a book, Living Beyond Pain.
If you're one of the 100 million people suffering from chronic pain, this is a book for you. Living Beyond Pain, in stores now.
This is the Dr. Linda Mintle Show. We're glad you've joined us today. Let me remind you that you can check out Dr. Linda's books and blogs. Just go to her website, drlindamintle.com. There you'll find her blogs, her books, like I said, and you can also connect with her on social media. You can follow her on X or Instagram at the little @ sign, Dr. Linda Mintle, or on Facebook at Dr. Linda Mintle, author and speaker. And don't forget, her latest book is a workbook on anxiety that anyone can use to better understand anxiety and then know how to eliminate it from your life. It's called Hope and Healing for Anxiety, and it's linked on her website, drlindamintle.com, or anywhere you buy your books online. Okay, so we've been talking so far, Linda, about living with a narcissist, and it seems to me like living with a narcissist creates great anxiety. Did you deal with that in your book?
Well, I don't specifically tie it to that, but you're right, because I mean, just imagine day after day of living with someone who always thinks they're right, gets very defensive about what you do, thinks they're the only smart one in the room. That is a very difficult situation. And that's why it has come up a lot, because a lot of people will come to see me in therapy because they're like, I need to know how to deal with this. And when I try to use my regular strategies, like you and I, if we had a conflict, would try to sit and talk about it, it doesn't go anywhere.
Right.
And it seems to escalate the problem even more. So people are looking for a lot of help with this.
I think we see so many narcissists in the media too, and on the news.
Right.
And it seems like we're surrounded by these crazy people in love with themselves who think they're the smartest
I
people,
know.
and they don't listen. I think that's part of what's gone wrong in our country with the political debate. There's no more, everything's so divisive. There's no more civil discourse. It's all or nothing. And if I don't like you or you disagree with me, I cancel you and I hate you and I call you names.
I know.
That's narcissism, right?
Yeah, I mean, it could be a couple of other things too, but it is a very dominant trait that seems to get rewarded on social media. So I think it's a really dangerous trend.
Okay, so let's get to a few more strategies. This next one is one that we've discussed to prevent people from becoming defensive in their relationship. This one is one of your go-tos in couples work, right?
Yeah, and again, we're trying to think about the interactions not getting escalated.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say, even between the two of us, if I say, well, you did, you get defensive.
Sure.
Because I'm accusing, I'm blaming, or I might just be pointing it out. But most of us don't like to have our stuff pointed out to us, and we tend to get defensive.
Which is why my mother told us before we got married, you have to remember, when you argue, don't say you always or you never.
Oh, yeah.
It was
a you.
Right?
It was a you statement.
Yeah.
It's true. So instead, you want to use the I. So I'm feeling this way, or I would say, like, I'm frustrated. I don't know what to say to you. I don't know how to solve this problem. Those type of, statements are a little bit de-escalating than if you're doing the you. So for example, instead of saying, you always think you're right, which is probably what you're thinking, right?
And which may be true.
Which may be true. You just say something like, I feel hurt when my opinions aren't acknowledged. Now that's very different, right? I feel hurt when my opinions aren't acknowledged. It's a little bit less likely to trigger defensiveness, and because the person is kind of forced to see what you think and feel.
But you're kind of eliciting a little bit of guilt, right?
Well, you're just confronting with, when you do that, this is how it impacts me.
Okay.
And so it's kind of right there in front of them, even though they're not very empathetic, but you're telling them how you feel.
So over time, is it possible for the aggrieved partner, so to speak, to become more aware of tactics that are used that are manipulative, like gaslighting or playing the victim and those kinds of things?
Yeah, it does really help you to see the pattern, because then you won't fall as prey to those tactics, right? So the better you understand them, then the better you can resist. Now, I must acknowledge that in some cases, Norm, if it's a friendship, you might just want to end the friendship.
Wow.
I mean, if you really are struggling, that may be the best solution. It's different when you're married to someone who has narcissism. You need to be clear that couple work is needed, and you have to hold those boundaries. And especially if there are problems with abuse, then you would, probably take a separation for a while and while you're working on this. But you have to stay safe. But it's much more difficult when you're tied to the person versus when it's a friend or a coworker that you can pretty much avoid.
Right. Okay, let's talk about marriage for a second. Is it possible to have missed the clues when you were dating before you married that someone is a narcissist, or did they grow into it and turn into a narcissist later in life?
No, this is a pattern that develops from teenage years on. And it's a persistent pattern typically. So it's been there.
So you should have noticed it.
Well, yeah. I mean, sometimes, people are enamored with, that person has a lot of confidence, they're brilliant, they're successful. And if you don't know them that well, you might really think they are brilliant and successful, and they might be.
Right.
So it isn't, I think it's watching, I think that's why we're doing this show, actually, is watch how they interact with other people. Not just what they tell you, but how are they interacting with other people?
And you've often said, look how someone interacts with their mother or father.
Yes.
Would a narcissist interact differently with their parents?
Well, you might see the parents making them special and telling them they're brilliant and stuff. So just watch all those dynamics and see if you can pick up these patterns.
Okay, good. Before we move on, I want to get to something else. Are there certain treatments, therapeutic treatments, that work best?
Yeah, and we're not gonna go through all of those what they are, but I'll name some of them. So if
Okay.
you're listening and you're thinking, I need to have my person work on these things, you want to look for something called cognitive behavioral therapy. We've
Okay.
actually talked about that.
I like that one, but can we go get a pencil real quick and write this down?
Yeah, that would be good because I'm going to just list a few of
Okay,
them. So
okay.
cognitive behavioral therapy, it's called CBT.
Okay.
There's one called dialectical behavior therapy, which is DBT. And that's another one. There's one called schema therapy. And there's one called transference focus psychotherapy. And then another one called now this one's a little bit longer name, metacognitive interpersonal therapy, MIT. You'll think of the college.
Yeah.
Those are also used. So if you're looking for a therapist who's working with someone with narcissism, probably one of those therapies should be used because those are the evidence-based, the ones that have been proven to be successful.
And if you can't remember, it would be probably just as easy to ask, do you treat narcissism?
Right. And then what methods do
how?
you use?
Yeah.
And then
Good.
you'll get those names coming up.
I know you're often asked about biblical things, and in this case, are you asked about what the Bible says about narcissism? Because I can't think of a time when anywhere in Scripture it directly addresses it, but I do know that what we find in the Bible is a lot of traits of narcissists.
Yeah, you're not going to find the word in the Bible. I don't believe. I haven't read every translation, but I don't think that's in the Hebrew and Greek.
Well,
I don't know.
Narcissus comes from the Greek.
It does
but
come
I
from the
still
Greek
don't-
tragedy, right? Of him looking in the mirror and
That's
seeing
right,
himself.
loving in the
water.
water,
In the
his
water.
reflection,
Yeah,
right,
yeah. But yeah, the traits of pride,
Mm-hmm.
selfishness, arrogance, those are all in Scripture and they're warned against in the Bible.
Well, the Bible says, when pride comes, then comes disgrace. And another one, and a man's pride will bring him low, but the humble in spirit will retain honor. I mean, that's pretty clear. I think in these types of situations, the Bible may not say, you bad narcissist, you, but it sure says people who behave this way have dire consequences.
Well, I don't want to call anybody bad because they have a narcissism problem. I mean, it's a problem that somebody has, and it shouldn't be the whole definition of who they are. So I want to be careful with just throwing the label out. But certainly what we're describing is how people relate when they struggle with this type of issue. And so again, remember, underneath they're feeling very inadequate and insecure. So that's really at the heart of this. And when they're acting the way they're acting, then that pride that you're talking about is so clearly addressed as the root of selfishness. And it's referred to as the root of all evil in the Bible. It's also associated with jealousy. So we know that God detests the proud. His word even says they will not go unpunished. And pride usually cycles success, then warning, deception, and eventual downfall and devastation.
Well, that's certainly the pattern of the Old Testament with the entire Hebrew world went through all those types of processes. So biblically now, I'm thinking of an example. In Babylon, there was King Nebuchadnezzar. We've all heard the stories. And he said things like, "Is not Babylon the great, which I myself have built by the might of my power and the glory of my majesty?" Well, eventually his pride led to his downfall and a quick descent into madness, showing how God was sovereign even over the king and his arrogance.
Yeah, and then, of course, there's Lucifer, whose pride caused his fall from heaven. And this is what the scripture says, "You said in your heart, I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will make myself like the Most High." And boy, his consequences were eternal separation from God.
I think that's why God hates it so much, because in my mind, that was the original sin in heaven.
Yeah.
Lucifer sinned with pride.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, biblically, we know the antidote is humility. Jesus said, "He who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted." Humility is presented as wisdom that precedes honor.
And the Apostle Paul was a good model of humility, Norm. He acknowledged his weakness and dependence on God's grace. But he said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is perfected in weakness." Paul recognizes his limitations and reliance on God's strength, which is the opposite of pride. So as we close, if you live with someone with narcissism, know how to respond. Encourage them to work with you to improve the relationship and work through the biblical traits of humility, empathy, compassion, and love. There, spiritually, you'll get some work done.
Right.
Well, that's all the time we have today. Many thanks to my co-host Norm Mintle, who makes this show a conversation, and our technical producer Wanjing Pu, and our editor Katie Sims Wilson. From all of us here at Faith Radio, hey, we'll talk to you again next weekend. In the meantime, remember, we're doing life together, and it's better when you don't have to do it alone.
Doing life together.
Hey, thanks for listening to this conversation from the Dr. Linda Mintle Show. These conversations are available because of your support. Become a supporter now at myfaithradio.com. Please subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes, and share it with friends so we can live life to the fullest, walk confidently, and find healing and hope.